I promised we would segue from this AI conversation to the Hollywood AI conversation.
Yeah. I'm going to figure out a way to segue it.
Okay, I can segue this with a question.
Okay.
Go.
So I've found myself, for whatever reason, listening to a lot of podcasts about the strikes happening in Hollywood. And the reason I think we should talk about the strike right now is there's a lot of different things floating around, a lot of different arguments being had. There are two separate strikes happening that are kind of connected and kind of not. And the biggest thing I cannot figure out, and I want you to answer this for me, Kranz, is how much is this actually about AI? Because what the writers have been saying is we don't want studios to be able to use ChatGPT and other tools to generate scripts. The actors were saying we don't want you to be able to use our likenesses and like make deep fakes of us to go into movies. And then I listened to all these like big wigs in the entertainment business saying, no, that's all sort of a far off farce. What they're actually arguing about is streaming residuals. Which one is it?
Yeah, streaming residuals are residuals is the core thing here because residuals is how the majority of both actors and writers get paid.
Okay, so let's come back to that. But tell me how much AI actually matters first.
AI matters because in both cases, they're worried about the potential future use, not the current use, to some extent, to a large extent. And so they're worried about that potential future use, and they want to make sure that the studios don't be assholes further down the line. So for the writers, they're specifically saying, we want certain protections. You can't have ChatGPT go come up with a script and then make us write it and then not pay us for coming up with the ideas for the script. Like, we don't want to have to be using ChatGPT prompts to write. And so that's like the core thing there is they don't want they want AI to be treated as a tool, not as like a creative force that can be copyrighted and everything like that.
But no one is out here thinking that tomorrow ChatGPT could write a great script that would turn into a blockbuster Marvel movie, right?
Oh, some people.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're correct.
The studios are totally...
I mean, they're definitely not correct.
Yeah, the studios are very interested in AI, and they would love to be able to cut the writers out entirely or just pay writers to edit whatever ChatGPT wrote, which, like, they would love to do that, and they'd love to do that consistently. And the writers are like, you can't do that yet. You will probably be able to do that in a few years, and we want to go ahead and just nip that in the bud now.
Okay.
So that's what's happening with the writers. For the actors, it's specifically, right now, if you're an actor, you just go get scanned. Like, you signed a contract for a new show or something, a new movie, you go and they're going to like scan your face, they're going to scan your body, and then they just take that data and walk away with it. And right now it's not clear where they take that data. And if you know, hit me up because I'd love to know. But specifically background actors, they're saying, well, we would love to take a background actor's face and scan it and then never pay them for that initial scan and never pay them again and use their face however we want forever in our films and TVs.
Oh, interesting.
And so background actors are like that's how you get your card. That's how you kind of get into SAG. For some of them, it's not a livelihood, but it keeps the lights on, right? Like between that and their DoorDash side hustle or whatever. And so they obviously don't want to do that. So that's where they're concerned there, because most of the big actors, like the Matt Damons, the Cillian Murphys. Yes, I saw Oppenheimer.
Yeah. You see it in 70 millimeter?
No.
With a Palm Pilot?
But I saw it with Christopher Nolan. And so I think it's okay if we
Did
see
he
it
like
in IMAX. I think it's
Flex.
okay. Yeah, flex.
Just to put a point on that. So I was thinking about this because have you guys seen the new Indiana Jones movie?
No.
Yeah.
So,
but they age stuff they do with that.
Yeah. So for the first like 20 minutes of the movie, I guess this is a spoiler alert, but like whatever, it's Indiana Jones. He's de-aged, like digitally de-aged, and it is.
How is that a spoiler? If you think that's a spoiler, don't email us. Go ahead.
If you think it's a spoiler, you already have commented on the Verge.com about it, so I understand. But it's better than any version of that I've seen before, and it's also still pretty bad. And it also clearly still requires Harrison Ford.
So that one was unique, though, because they used Lucasfilm had tons of footage of him. They had all these dailies from all the other projects, all the Star Wars and Indiana Jones they've used when he was that age. And so they actually used all of that footage to recreate his face.
So that's actually maybe closer to the kind of thing you're talking about than most of what we've seen in the past.
And that one was okay because like it was like the stuff, they weren't using it in other things. And for someone of his level, like they're going to go and make a different deal. Like,
yeah, presumably he agrees.
He's going to have like a SAG contract, but he's also going to have this other contract, and they'll make those agreements. This is to protect all those people who don't have these other separate contracts, to make sure that they don't get screwed over. So that like you're a background actor, you hit it big, and then suddenly you're just popping up all over the place because 20 years ago somebody got the rights to your face. That's what they're trying to avoid.
So what's fascinating about that is the writers are sort of operating in the bounds of existing copyright law.
Yes.
Because they write things.
Yeah.
And you can make copies of it. And the law understands all of that. And so the actors and so the writers are like, we want to get paid these rates for these kinds of work. Mm-hmm. Your face is not a copy of anything.
It's just
or should not be. And the idea that you can scan it and that becomes a copy of your face and you've made a copy of your face doesn't exist anywhere. But it exists in some state level likeness law, right of publicity law. There's no copyright law for your face. This is just a new problem. And so I think Hollywood is going to have to invent a solution to this problem that is way ahead of the government, of courts or whatever, because there's just no answer you can't go and find the answer to this question inside the law. And I'm not saying the writers don't have complicated problems of their own, but they're at least inside of something that makes sense, that there's a framework for talking about. I'll give you an example. Just this week, there was a court case where a bunch of photographers had sued first BuzzFeed and then Instagram because BuzzFeed had embedded Instagrams of their photos. So that the photographers are taking some photos, posting them on Instagram. BuzzFeed embedded the Instagram posts onto BuzzFeed articles. Yeah. And the photographers sued BuzzFeed and Instagram and said, this is copyright infringement.
Haven't we had this debate before? I'm getting like real deja vu listening to you explain
this happens all the time. And so the courts over the years, this is a true thing in our law. No one talks about it. Like if you look at people on the social networks, they're all like, LLMs are fair use, training data, like this is where we are in reality in 2023. The courts applied what is known as the server test. And they said, no copy of this photo was ever made on BuzzFeed. Yes. The photo still existed on Instagram servers, and the user's web browser called Instagram servers. Thereby, the server test, which is now part of United States copyright law, is there is no copyright infringement. The photographers lose.
But if BuzzFeed had screenshotted that Instagram and put it on its site, it might have been a different fight.
And to the user, there's no difference in those things.
Right.
Right.
Wild.
And where is the copy? I'm going to end up saying this on the show 1,000 times during this AI battle. Copyright law is about copies. The court, in deciding whether embedding an Instagram post on a BuzzFeed article is copyright infringement, goes and finds the copy of the photo, and it's on Instagram server, because that's where the photographer themselves put it in accordance with Instagram's terms of service. And the court said, nope, BuzzFeed can use it for free because it's on Instagram server. And if they had screenshotted it, like David said, and put it on their thing, which is to you exactly the same experience, and in many cases, good journalism practice, right? Because Instagram could take a photo down, who knows? Then they might have lost because the copy of the photo would have been on BuzzFeed servers. Whoa. And that is the game. Like, where is the copy?
Yeah.
And so the writers on their side, they have copy. They have hundreds of years of copyright law about writing things down and making copies of them and putting them here and who owns what's rights. And then you get to faces and you're like, we just don't do this.
Yep.
There's a vacuum of this because you can't do it.
There's just never been occasion to care about it before, right?
You've made a copy of my face. Like, oh, that's a photo.
Yeah.
That's what that is. Right. Or you've made a movie, and like for me to be in your movie, there's some laws about like my life. There's cases about re-edits of movies that you can we've covered because they're complicated, but you've never had you took my whole face and now you can use my face as many times as you want.
We have though. We see this sometimes in Hollywood, there is a little bit more law here, and I don't know.
California state law because of Hollywood exists.
Because Simu Liu, the actor who was in Shang-Chi, was last year for Marvel. Before he was a big famous actor, he went out and did a whole bunch of photos for go use them in Shutterstock or whatever. And so then now you can go find those and be like, put this big celebrity.
Like royalty free.
Yeah, this royalty free big celebrity
That's great.
thing. And we've seen this happen a couple of times, and then they'll usually
But you can do that. He can't tell you to take them down because they're royalty free stock photos of him.
Right. But like,
but even that is a photo. That's not his face.
Yeah.
You haven't made him do something he wasn't doing before because you have a digital model of his face.
yeah.
And there's just no, as far as I know, there's not like a great framework for that. There's some ones people have come up out of whole cloth, like that horrible Will Smith movie that they shot at 120 hertz. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Was it the one with?
Not the Lawnmower Man.
Gemini Man.
I said Lawnmower Man. If you watch it at the intended frame rate, it looks like a CGI demo reel. It doesn't even look like a real movie. Like, why'd you do this?
It's like an Unreal Engine commercial.
Yeah. For that movie, he signed a deal where I think he owns that model. He didn't want the studio to have it. But he's Will Smith. He has the leverage to do it. Right. These background actors, their only way to get leverage is by going on strike.
Yeah. And so that's what they're doing. They're all on strike, and it's going to last a while. It seems like everybody's really entrenched in their positions. The producers don't want to give over more money because this all boils down to money, right?
Yeah.
Streaming makes a lot of money. Streaming is, we like to talk about, which streamer is going to be on the Go 90 scale, but they all make money. They're all doing pretty okay. Some Netflix, way better than everybody else, right? They're doing great.
Netflix, they rolled out the ad tier. Subscriptions went up.
Yeah, and Netflix also was one of the first to figure out how to, I don't want to say manipulate, but aggressively use the current contracts to cut down on how much they pay people. And that's what they're trying to get rid of. That's what they're trying to fix.
Right.
And naturally, Netflix doesn't want to help them on that because they want to keep all the money for themselves.
So Netflix is really interesting. It's time for the disclosure block. We're way late on this. I apologize. We're minutes late to this series of escalating disclosures. One, we made a Netflix show. I'm the EP of that Netflix show. It's called The Future of. You should go watch it. Two, our company makes all kinds of other Netflix shows with all the other streamers. That division of our company is called Vox Media Studios. You should watch everything they make and then send us cash in an envelope. Our newsroom is unionized, the Writers Guild of America. Alex.
I'm in the WGA. Yeah.
Here she is.
It's true.
She's on strike.
I'm not on strike.
She's not on strike.
I'm not on a contract that is currently on strike.
Alex will not be in the background of your movie.
That's
until future notice.
And then NBC is one of these companies, Universal.
And NBC Universal is currently
and they own a chunk of Vox Media.
Yep. We all watch shows from time to time.
There's all your
They
disclosures.
are actually at the heart of a lot of the strike stuff happening this week. NBC Universal.
Really?
Yep.
Do tell.
Yeah. So we're getting into tree law now.
Oh, here we go. Tree law.
So NBC,
all caps tree law. Just to be clear, this is
I'm
not
so
lowercase.
excited.
This is all caps.
NBC Universal is one of the many studios that is currently, like they're having strikes outside of them. And so picket lines go out there and they march. And it's a real honest to God picket line like you see from history.
The signs are incredible, by the way. Just as a side note, like an incredible genre of the internet right now is writer and actor picket signs. They're just phenomenal.
If you ever wanted to go meet an actor, they might be on a picket line right now and you can go meet them. But you should also be picketing and like give them water and stuff.
Yeah.
But so planned picket lines were to happen outside of NBC Universal. They have a whole bunch of trees which provide lovely shade. Those trees are owned by Los Angeles because they're outside of the studio. Those trees were all mysteriously trimmed just before the picket line was supposed to happen. So there was no shade. And it's like 100 degrees in Hollywood right now. And so NBC Universal said, it's just standard. We always trim these trees down to the
nubs.
Yeah, this is totally normal. It's fine. It's not. LA is like investigating them because
tree law.
You can't. That's not their trees to go trimming, and it's apparently really bad to trim those trees to that length in the summertime.
That's just cartoon villainy.
Seriously.
Like I was gonna say the thing about Netflix, which all the producers are doing cartoon villainy in some way. The tree law thing is ridiculous. Netflix got a pass on this contractual obligation stuff, right? Because if you think back a year ago or 2 years ago, Netflix was just writing checks nobody could match.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, Shonda Rhimes, here's $1 billion. Make as many shows as you can, right? And what has turned is Netflix needed to be profitable, so it stopped writing those checks. It burned a lot of those creators by not renewing their shows. It burned a lot of the fandoms of those shows by not renewing the shows. It has all this content. No one's making any residuals, or not a lot of money.
Pennies. They make pennies.
And then the most important thing is that all the other companies chased Netflix into that business model.
Yep.
So they all felt like they had to compete. They had to outspend Netflix. So for a minute, Netflix is the industry hero because they're writing big checks and they have a business model that seems to work. And it does because they're profitable. And then at the other end of the rainbow is, the whole industry adopted this business model. The financial structure of how we get paid is now gone because we were addicted to cable reruns and selling internationally into different markets. And now it's all just on HBO Max or Peacock or Netflix or whatever.
Yeah, because these shows are like, if you look at the contract, these shows appear differently in the contract. They don't appear as linear TV. They don't appear as cable TV. And so in order to hit like that threshold to start paying higher residuals, they have to make more content. And it's usually like, I think after the second season is when things start to go up, which is why you see so many Netflix shows canceled after the second season, because then they don't have to pay increased residuals. But Kimiko Glenn was an actress on Orange is the New Black. She was a main character on that show. She was in, I think she started in like the second or third season is when she appeared on the show. In a ton of it, main character, making maybe, if she's lucky, 50 cents per episode in residuals when like she's a star of the show. And that's most of that cast, which was all primarily people who weren't normally seen on TV. It was a big deal that they all got these roles and they were all having to work second jobs, third jobs to afford it. And they still are. Like this did not open the world to them and make them all fabulously rich. Maybe other shows did if they were lucky and got a network show. But if you're on a streaming show, you're not like, you cannot support yourself. You have to have a second job, which means you will see an actor you love at Target and you should be really polite to them because they're probably working. Just be chill. Yeah,
it's like Mandy Moore, who is like a huge star and was on This Is Us, which was a giant hit, was talking in an interview, I think this week, about the residuals check that she's been getting from Hulu, which now has This Is Us. And she said there was one check that was 1 penny, there was one that was 2 cents, there was one that was 81 cents. It's like, this is not actual money that these folks are getting. But the thing that I struggle with is if you rewind 5 years, there were a lot of very smart people who were like waving their hands saying, this is unsustainable. Netflix is spending money it doesn't have. It's in crazy debt. We're due for some consolidation. This is all getting out of control. And for years, everybody just like blissfully danced along. And a lot of people made a lot of money off of these streaming services. Like Shonda Rhimes made a ton of money and employed a lot of people. And so were we just always due for this correction? This is just the pendulum swinging to the other side before we get to the middle?
Because the WGA strike back in 2007 was about residuals then too for streaming. They saw this was like totally nascent at this point. I think there were like maybe 3 web series. Disclosure, I was actually writing for one of those.
Good
at the
disclosure.
Time. Yes. It was Lifetime.
That's a flex disclosure. That's so much better than my Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat disclosure.
I wrote one episode.
What was it called?
The show was called Inspector Mom.
Oh my God.
Incredible.
Wait.
Starring Danica McKellar.
Danica McKellar. Wow.
Yeah. She's lovely.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's fancy.
But so back in 2007, it was like us and Battlestar Galactica. And I want you to be very clear. We were in no way in the same level as Battlestar Galactica.
One of those was a hit.
Yeah, one of those the other one you just learned about. But there wasn't a lot, but everybody was super interested in it. And at the time, everybody was doing it as an ultra low budget. And when you're producing these things as ultra low budget, you don't have to pay as much. You can really dick people around, and you can pay them a lot less. You can pay your writers less, you can pay your actors less, and everything like that. And they were like, well, this is going to be a whole new thing. We clearly need to make sure our writers get paid. And so that's why they went on strike back in 2007 to make sure that they were going to get that money. And they were really not as aggressive as they should have been. There was a big argument within the WGA about it at the time. The people who were like, don't worry about it, won. All the other people were like, what did we say for the last 15 years? And so now we're at this point. Like, they've been waiting for a very long time. This was always probably going to happen. And I think the biggest surprise is that the DGA, the Directors Guild, isn't a part of this, because so many, I think the reason that didn't happen for them is so many of them are also producers. Much more of them, like standard, are producers as well. So they're like, this works for us. We're fine.
Yeah.
We can make it work.
But they're also directors in a very real way. You can't copy their work.
Yeah.
Like
a lot of those big existential questions that are facing the writers and the actors, directors don't have to deal with. And these other ones are having to face that. Like writers having to face, okay, if the producer like goes and writes a prompt and sends me that prompt writes a prompt, ChatGPT spits something out. He sends that to me. Who owns and I write a whole script. Do I own the copyright to my script? Does ChatGPT own the copyright to the script? Does the guy who like busted out a quick prompt own the copyright to my script and everything in it and all the intellectual material? Like they gave me 150 words and I turned that into a 2-hour movie. Why should the studio get to own that?
So again, there's just a long history of concepts that might help you answer that question. I don't know where they're going to land. What I know is the money that they're looking for, the challenge is that either it doesn't exist the way that it used to, or it exists, but it's flowing to the CEOs, / it's being used to fund vastly more projects than before.
Yeah, I think.
And that's like a real... So Friends, I think Friends is like the example here. All the people who made Friends are rich and they're going to keep being rich and whatever.
They're doing great.
They're doing great. Seinfeld, another example. They made Friends. They put it on broadcast television. They sold a bunch of ads against that broadcast television. They paid all the actors $1 million an episode for Friends because just that first cut was so valuable with ads on broadcast television. Everybody watched it every Thursday. Yeah. Then they sold it again to foreign countries and to syndication and to cable networks. Then they sold it a 15th time to Netflix. Then it came off of Netflix and they sold it a 16th time to, what is it, Hulu? Where is it now? Wherever it is now.
I think it's on Peacock now.
It's on Peacock.
It's on Peacock, yeah.
Where they sold it to themselves the last time. Crazy.
Well, and it was a big deal. Do you remember how big a deal that was? Actually, because they were leaving a ton of money on the table to bring it back to Peacock as a big bet on what Peacock was. Like that thing held its value for so long.
Right, because it's an asset. Like it's a very, I don't know, you make a widget and you can sell it however many times. The streaming model is you make a show and you sell it once.
Yep.
Right? Probably to yourself. And then you hope it brings in subscribers. And you kind of end up in this horrible Spotify situation where you're like, okay, you pay me $9 a month. You play this much Taylor Swift. We're going to divide up the total number of streams and Taylor Swift gets a penny, but she gets 1 billion streams. So it's 1 billion. And like that's the contract they're negotiating now has to contend with that math versus we made you a show and you have sold it for dollars over and over and over again. Now it's we made you a show and you're going to sell it for pennies once.
We're seeing a big change there. Like David Zaslav, love to rip on the guy. Cartoonish villain in many ways, but he is big on like a show doesn't work for us or whatever, we can go and sell it again. We saw that with Westworld, and I think we're going to see more of that. Especially some of it is we need to unload these assets that just aren't doing it for us. Maybe they'll do better on Peacock, because nobody subscribes to Peacock except for me.
Maybe they'll do better on Peacock. That's going to save the industry. That's a sign. That's a strike sign right there.
But they are thinking about like we like they're starting to think about how we need to sell these things and make more money off of it. The studios are thinking that, not just the writers and actors and producers and everybody who are making no money in perpetuity on these projects. So I think we are going to see some changes there. I think we're going to see kind of a return to some extent of that current, like that TV model from 10, 15 years ago. I don't think it's going to be as lucrative as it was then. And
it's going to be 2003 again. This is just what we're doing here.
We're going to see. I think what we're really going to find out is how powerful the Netflix voting bloc in the producers union is, or the Producers Guild. That's the real thing, because Netflix doesn't want to ever move to that model. They want to have everything owned by them and then never pay you residuals. A lot of these other studios have been doing this a lot longer, and they're going to be more inclined to go in a different direction. So we're going to see. I'm really curious to see how this ends.